Hi, I'm Bree Stock, Master of Wine, and today we're going to be discussing sustainability in wine. Biodiversity is important, I think, in all vineyards, and it really is about from your cover crops, if you can add in biodiversity into your cover crops, planting a mixture of mustard and clover and peas and nitrogen fixing plants into the vineyard, and plants that create flowers like clover and mustard that attract pollinators into the vineyard and bring in biodiversity is really what's helping the microorganisms and mycorrhizal fungi in the soils and helping to breed those populations in the soils. By having a greater population of these microbes in the soils, they're actually making your vine more susceptible and open to feeding from them. So those microbes and mycorrhizal fungi in the soil are breaking down all of the carbohydrates and sugars that they get from these cover crops and allowing them to be transported into the living roots of the vines. And so this is that symbiotic relationship between vine roots and mycorrhiza and the microbes in the soil. And that's where the vines get their natural nutrients from. And so in the past, when a vineyard has been reared on, systemic herbicides and fungicides and fertigation, you're spraying all of that into the plant, and so the plant is absorbing that through its leaves and not necessarily making its roots work to supply all of those nutrients to the plant. So that's where we work biodiversity into our vineyards. The other place that biodiversity is really important is also in bringing, livestock and also attracting the natural predators in the vineyard. So integrated pest management is what we call when we're allowing or bringing in pollinators and other pests that will feed off of other pests in the vineyard. And then on top of that, we can bring in chickens or ducks or pigs that will also eat pests in the vineyard. So ducks and chickens will be picking off of the trunks and any of the mites that might be in the trunks and moving their way up into the plant. Pigs will eat voles in the vineyard as well. And then you can also add in sheep into the vineyard, which brings a natural fertilizer and also helps to aerate the soils. And so soils having aeration and a lot of microbes in them is really how you increase that mycorrhizal and microbe complexity and capacity in your soil, and how you allow your vine roots to access all of those nutrients, which it then takes naturally up into the plant and into the fruit. And so in those first few years where you're transitioning from a conventionally farmed vineyard into an organic vineyard or a regenerative organic vineyard, you will have a couple of years where the vine freaks out a little bit and stops producing as much, because you're essentially, taking it off steroids and all of the processed foods that it's been given. And so it has, this period of needing to readapt itself to teaching itself how to feed naturally again. And that is, a stressful time for growers, absolutely, because it's a couple of years of reduced yields. However, once you get through that, the vine will be stronger. It will be more resilient to diseases and trunk disease. It will better, be able to be more resilient through drought years and impacts of, really large heat events or cold events. So what it really is an investment into building resilience in your vine. And also the fruit quality and the fruit flavor is so much better once you come out the other side. So you have larger nutrient loading in your fruit, but you also have the true sense of place, because now the vine is taking its nutrients and what it needs from that relationship that it has with the biodiversity of microbes in the soil, taking all of those nutrients, feeding itself, and creating the true sense of those clonal selections that you have in that vineyard, instead of having it all sprayed on there and often just having a lot of more diluted flavors. If you're respectfully and sustainably, organically growing your fruit, then what you're really getting is the fruit into the cellar and being able to have the fermentation be a true representation of the vineyard, the site, and the vintage. And it gives you the most honest and transparent and genuine product, instead of adding a yeast that develops black cherry flavors or pear flavor. It takes some time, but vineyards are long-term developments. So you really need to commit to these farming practices. But once you have converted and committed to them, they're going to be so much more resilient. And with the amount of climate change that we're seeing, the erratic climate change that's happening in our vineyards, we've had the hottest year on record in 2024 in vineyards that, like the Willamette Valley, where there's a lot of dry grown, non-irrigated vineyards. We are really relying now on the soil moisture and the rainfall that happens during the winter and spring months to be absorbed into the ground and feed all of our cover crops, setting up our microbes with a lot of nutrients that they'll then transfer into the plants. So ultimately, we're building resilience for our vineyard. When I work with vineyards to transition from conventional practices to becoming more sustainable and adopting more organic practices in the vineyard, we really look first at the biodiversity, because that's such an easy place to start. And building soil health and soil nutrients for your vine is really the first and easiest place to begin. And that really is looking at your cover crops and making sure that you're planting a diversity of cover crops and rotating cover crops, different seeds into the vineyard, and really starting to build that soil health naturally that way. Also bringing in simple things like owl boxes and bat boxes into the vineyard to make it more attractive to birds of prey like owls and hawks, who can come into those boxes and really sit and take out other pests in the vineyard. That we then look at how the vine is balanced. And that may mean that you need to cut your canes back to produce a smaller crop for a couple of years, so that the vine is able to continue to produce quality fruit, but maybe at a smaller yield just for the first couple of years as it transitions. However, once you get out of that phase, your yields will be improved. You will be spending less money on sprays in the vineyard. Your vineyard will have less tractor compaction, which is ultimately better again for those microbes in the soil and for the vine nutrients. And then also your employees will be more happy as well. The vineyard stewards, who don't have to wear the full hazmat suits and be doing several sprays on a very weekly or 14-day basis of conventional sprays is really important to people's health going forward. The other thing that we also recommend is identifying oak trees and forests and hedgerows, plants that can be planted to create more biodiversity, and that keep a very natural native yeast population in their trees and trunks. So making sure that your farm looks more like a whole farm system and works with the natural biodiversity of the place is a really important attribute of a healthy vineyard system.